To another Yieldstreet webinar. To check us out, be sure to visit yieldstreet.com to learn more about our offerings and sign up to receive the latest on our webinars and market updates. Or download the Yieldstreet mobile app in Google Play or the App Store. If you're an originator, be sure to click through to the Raise Capital page or reach out to our originations team, originations@yieldstreet.com. We will be answering questions for the last 10 minutes of the webinar, so please submit any that you may have through the Q&A. My name is Talia Fayaz, and I'm a software engineer at Yieldstreet. I'm here with Glenna, DeRoy, and Marcus Brito, and today we'll talk about the evolution of our distributed fintech startup. Glenna has been the director of product at Yieldstreet for over 3 years now, and Marcus Brito, our principal technical architect, has been with Yieldstreet since its inception. Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Hi guys, I'm really happy to be here today. As Talia said, I'm one of the directors of product here at Yieldstreet. That's my dog. Focused on the investor experience. Before that, I was a director of product at an online lender, also based here in New York, and I started my product career in media.
Great, and Marcus?
Hi, so I'm the principal technical architect for Yieldstreet. That's a mouthful. Basically means that while Glenna works out exactly what we need to build to make our investors happy, I'll try to find out how we do that, how we can use technology to build that great product. Before Yieldstreet, I worked at a few other startups, helping bootstrap them, and other large companies from agribusiness to telecom. And yep, that's it.
Awesome, Marcus. It's great to have you and Glenna here. I'm a newer engineer here, but since both of you have been at Yieldstreet for quite some time, what can you tell us about the evolution of Yieldstreet as a company?
Yeah, so... sorry.
Maybe you can go first.
Sure, yeah. I joined in late 2017, and at the time I was the only product manager on the team. I wasn't the first PM at Yieldstreet, but I was the only. So over the past few years, we've grown our product team to 5 PMs, plus now a chief product officer. And we've also integrated design and data into the product organization as well, which has been, I think it's really helped us sort of level up our skill sets as a team. And as the business grew, obviously, we found the need to build more simultaneously to serve the changing needs of our company and the needs of our investors. And so what was one engineering team, became many smaller teams focused on various areas of the business, which Marcus can definitely continue to explain.
Yeah, we've come a long way. I've joined Yieldstreet, like Talia said, since the inception back in 2015. Back then, Yieldstreet was more an idea than an actual tech platform. But the idea was already very well formed. We had already people investing, we were already taking money, even though much of our tech platform wasn't exactly automated. Right? Much of it was actually Excel spreadsheets back then. And then it was a matter of building a technological product around that, of automating as much as we can, of making sure that our operations scale. So as the company grows, as we acquire more investors, as we expand our product offering, we hire more people to ensure that we can build the technological platform required to make sure that this scales with thousands and maybe more investors.
Yeah, Marcus, so you mentioned that Yieldstreet's engineers have been in multiple countries since the beginning, but remote work has actually become a reality, I believe, for many countries, for many companies just recently. Do you think recent events have changed the way our distributed system works? And if so, how?
It did, of course. I think we at Yieldstreet actually handle this probably better than many companies out there because we have been a distributed company from the start, right? I joined in 2015 here from Brazil and with Yieldstreet's office in New York. So from the very beginning, from the very first developer that I had, we were already a distributed team. And as we grew, that continued to be a reality. A couple of years ago, we added more people in Malta. We have quality engineers in Argentina and so on. So we never had to face that transition full on, like from cold in-person interaction to full remote at the same time. No. So we were hopefully blessed in that transition. But some things did change, right? Even though we already had used to this kind of interaction, the small interactions that we had in office with intra-teams, like the team here in Brazil, the team in New York, in Malta, we used to have a lot of interactions in those offices that are now gone, with everybody remote, with everybody working from home. So we have to be, I think, a little more conscientious of those interactions, of the need for those interactions, and just not, assume that everybody is working from the same place because, well, we never were, but now more than ever, right? So I think we just had to be more aware of this fact and create opportunity for that to happen, right? You are making a virtual call, like a stand-up call, or a meeting about a new future, or anything that we are involving multiple people in. It's not just about talking that one feature on the exact purpose of that meeting, but about creating space for more casual conversation, creating space for unscripted interactions between people, so you can keep that team feeling going on.
I think that's very important too. Did anything change for you, Glenna, on the product side?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that, like Marcus said, when we expanded our team to Malta, so that now we were working with engineers who are based in Europe, not just in South America, they're definitely about a year ago when we made that change, I think the team was really used to a lot of synchronous communication. We used Slack probably heavier than we should have. We took for granted that we would be able to schedule meetings at any time during the working day. And I think that, adding the Malta team definitely made us, I think, a bit more efficient as a team in the past year, and one that emphasized more the importance of documentation and other asynchronous communication styles. So for sure, those adjustments helped prepare us. And I think that just in general, as Agile practitioners, and, we have been rooted, so much of the coronavirus I think impact has been that it's just been a disruption to people's routines and to what was normal for you. And so to be working at a company that, practices Agile software development and has the cadence of every 2 weeks, a sprint planning, a demo, a retrospective, like being able to fall back on those routines, I think that, just kind of continued to use them, but they certainly were, I think, more important to us as a team under the current circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. I know as I started right now, my engineering lead is in Brazil, I believe. So I always kind of have to be there if I want to set up meetings with him a couple of hours early. So it definitely is a little bit tough, but we definitely make it work, I think. And I think the little things we do to stay connected as a company are so important. I mean, when I started, I only had like 3 months at Yieldstreet, and then it was just work from home ever since then. But I do love the little things we do. Like we've had engineering team lunches to kind of keep us together. So I do appreciate that. I think that's kind of what's keeping us all connected until we get back, hopefully soon. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about working together as a single unit, creating like a cohesive team. Maybe you can start, Glenna.
Sure. Yeah, I think that honestly, a lot of it, has to do with, who you bring onto the team. So I think that as we've been, as we've grown, as I said, from when I started in 2017, we've grown the team significantly. And, hiring, product managers, I want to make sure that, we make the expectations super clear that the team in Brazil or the team in Malta or the team in Argentina, these are our teammates. It may not be the same as another, working relationship you had maybe at a past company that treated perhaps the remote workforce as just that, as remote and sort of disconnected from your day-to-day activities. At Yieldstreet, it's a very different mentality and a very different approach. And I think that being clear about that from the onset is super important. As we've brought on new members of the team, I definitely think we've been successful at kind of communicating that cultural expectation. And I think that from then on, it's just about kind of adjusting your working style a bit to make sure that you practice good etiquette and, include everyone in conversations that are relevant to them. And, where necessary, adapt your own processes or the way that you work to fit the way that this team needs to work. And don't get kind of hung up on your own sort of way of doing things or what may have worked for you in the past, but keeping an open mind as to the feedback that you're receiving from the team and adjusting from there.
Marcus, did you want to speak on this a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, everything that Glenna said was one thing that I think matters a lot to me, especially, like Glenna said, being remote from New York, is that the team is not second class like other remote companies where we just get that work shipped to a remote position and that work gets completed and gets shipped back. You know, we are in constant interaction. We are the development team in Malta, in Brazil, in Argentina, in New York. It's one team working together towards a single goal. There are no hierarchies in that relationship, right? And when we are talking to people, speaking from my own experience here, like in Brazil, sometimes new people joining in don't fully get that kind of integration. Right? People are used to work for companies in that model where you are subordinate to another team that's demanding work from you, and that's not the case here. It takes a while for everyone to actually understand that every member of the team, no matter where you work, or no matter what position in the team you are in, is able to contribute ideas, to bring up new products, to improve what we have today, regardless of exactly the kind of task you are concerned with right now. But the good news is that once that sinks in, once that people understand that, yes, I am a full part of this company and my ideas are working and I can contribute as much as I want, this creates a sense of, a shared sense of purpose for the whole team that really, really helps bind everything together. Right? It becomes easy to collaborate when we have that shared mission, when we have that shared vision, and see that everyone is working together towards that single goal of advancing Yieldstreet's product.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when I first came in as an engineer, I think, I was always just assumed that I'd just be given tickets and just kind of like pushing those out. But I really was encouraged by by our engineering manager and by my team to really like go and take on parts of the app that I thought needed work or anything that I wanted to improve, including working with other teams cross-functionally, like the design team and data team, to get little projects in as well. So I thought that was also really great. But even working as a single unit, there must be some cultural differences. I mean, you have people in Malta, Brazil, New York, especially New York, we're so diverse. How do you, Glenna, Marcus, maybe you can start. How do you feel like Yieldstreet tries to bridge cultural differences and gaps? And is that tough for you or for us in general?
Yeah, I mean, first, I want to give a shout out to Camille, our Chief People Officer, who's been doing a great work of, improving Yieldstreet culture and getting everyone together. And yes, there are differences between countries or even in the same team because each one of us brings a different background, right? Each one of us have different experiences in life, has a different identity, has something else to contribute to the team. And acknowledging those differences and being curious about them, looking at what makes each of us us and how we can bring those experiences to the table, help bridge that. I mean, keep being open about these differences, talking about them, being curious, and finding ways to work together is what works for us.
Glenna, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think, and actually I was just thinking as you were speaking, Talia, like, for sure we're talking about the, the impact of having, a team that spans multiple offices across multiple different countries. But, you were mentioning that even for you joining a team, it's, there's sort of certain cultural expectations that as a junior member of the team, my role is this or my role is that. And I think that that's very similar in some sense to the, the expectation that as someone who's not working in the kind of like New York office, that I wouldn't be expected or my ideas wouldn't be as welcomed. And so it's an interesting, I think, parallel to draw because I think it just speaks to sort of the company culture at Yieldstreet and just the attitude that we have around kind of ownership being a really core value to us. And so that is, I think, at the core of what what we say to folks when they are new on the team, or what we say to people who join in Brazil or in Malta. It really is, I think it goes back to that core value of being able to take ownership and, feel that you have the capability to really impact this business. And, that's why someone I think would be attracted, or certainly why I was attracted to work at startups, is just the sense that I would be able to have that broad impact was really something that I wanted out of my role. And it's certainly been the case at Yieldstreet. I think that it just kind of goes back to that, like I said, that core value around ownership. I think beyond that, definitely, as Marcus said, just approaching, your differences with curiosity and just trying to learn more about what makes people tick. Just asking a lot of questions, I think, is the best way to learn about your teammates, figure out not only what makes you different, but also what commonalities that you share. And then you can kind of move forward working together upon that stronger foundation. And then I guess the final point I'll make on this is that, of course, this year we haven't been able, to do any international travel. And I do think that, we will have to find a way to get back to that. I don't think that there's any real substitute for being able to kind of, get on the ground and work with people kind of in their home environment. You learn a lot more about the culture. You learn a lot more about the people. And I think some of my, most favorite memories of my time at Yieldstreet have been the opportunities, that I've had to visit our offices in Brazil, Argentina, and right before coronavirus, also Malta. We've hosted people here in New York as well. And it's been, I think it's really been super fun to see people kind of experience the city, sometimes for the very first time. So I think that there's a lot of ways that we try to create that close bond. One of them is in-person travel, and soon hopefully we'll be able to get back to that.
Yeah, I remember when, go ahead, Marcus.
Sorry, it does help a lot that at the end of the day, we are more similar than we are not, right? Exactly. Especially at a tech company like us. I think in the end, we are all just a bunch of geeks that love technology for itself. And that's a great conversation starting to begin with, right? There's a lot that we love together that helps.
Yeah, I remember, Marcus, when we were at our pod meeting and we went around the room doing icebreakers and just asking if we could each become an expert in something instantly. I think everyone, what was yours, Marcus? Did you say integrated circuits? And I said quantum physics. So we definitely all share our interest in math and science for sure. And I remember when Lucas and Gustavo, two of our other engineers, actually came to New York, again, right before COVID. And I remember the whole team, the whole company came out to kind of spend time with them, and we did dinner and drinks, and it was just great. Glenna, what would you say outside of product and tech, how do you facilitate that same type of relationship building and learning across all the teams, maybe within the company or external to that as well? Yeah.
Honestly, I would say that this is one of the silver linings of COVID is really that teams that at Yieldstreet that were not typically working remote and did not have the same, I would say, daily kind of orientation for kind of a distributed workforce. We all got forced into it. And so there have been, I think, some changes that we've made company-wide recently that have really helped not just kind of keep us more in sync now that we're all, or many of us are working from home, but also had the side benefit of really integrating all of our team members into certain areas of the business. So I'm just thinking about things like stepping up the frequency of our all company meetings, which we call Word on the Street. That really was helpful. And a number of teams have started open houses as well. So, 45 minutes to an hour on a particular topic that's close to their domain. I've attended open houses from our investments team about deal restructuring. I've learned a lot about how they approach the due diligence process associated with our investments. And those were opportunities for learning that didn't really exist prior to COVID, certainly not in the form that they do, where they're now super open to pretty much anyone with an internet connection and Yieldstreet email address. And I think the same could be said for, like, for example, our design team is doing open houses now, and even our infrastructure team. So other teams are also getting the experience of being able to learn from those within our technology organization. So I think it's, we've taken advantage, I think, of a crisis, in some ways that have really helped, I think, all members of the Yieldstreet team better understand the day-to-day. And I think it's brought us together. And so these are some things that I think we should continue even when we're able to return to our respective offices, because I think they've been really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Coronavirus shown us that we need to be more conscientious about our communication, about our intra-company communication. And when we started applying actions to fix those gaps, we not only feel those problems that we had before, but also addressed other stuff, right? Like those intra-teams communication, because we didn't have before, and now we do. We are not only backfilling the gaps that were made apparent, like coronavirus, but going beyond it, which will happen to people.
I'm sorry, Mark, I just didn't hear the last part. Can you say that one more time?
About how we not only backfill the gaps that we've identified during the coronavirus gap, but went beyond, creating more spaces and more opportunity for team interaction. I hope this is, and I'm sure it will, be something that we keep once this crisis is over.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, we also did, right before COVID, I actually run an organization called NYC Coders. I remember Yieldstreet teamed up with my organization to hold a software engineering panel. And we also did the hackathon. Maybe, Glenna, you can talk a little bit about how that might have helped us.
Oh yeah, the hackathon was great. It's so funny. It's sort of a coincidence, I guess, that our first hackathon happened to sort of coincide. I don't think that COVID really drove that. We recently hired a new director of engineering here who's been a great addition to the team. And so one of the things he wanted to do was really try a hackathon kind of as soon as possible. And again, it had some of the same benefits, I guess, as some of the other stuff I was saying before. The opportunity to work on something that is, connected to Yieldstreet, but not connected to your day-to-day gives you, and with different people that you might work with on a day-to-day, gives you that, opportunity to develop new relationships, to focus on, a challenge that is maybe a bit more imaginative or kind of outside the box than what you would spend, your days doing normally. And I think it was really great, and it really brought us together. Like, a lot of people participated, on the hackathon teams, even from outside the technology organization. I think next time we'll probably have even more participation from outside the technology organization because because I think the response was so great around the hackathon presentations and demos that I think more people will want to get involved next time. We're actually doing one toward the end of the year, so I'm really excited for that.
I'm also super excited for that. We actually have a question from the audience. It goes to either one of you. How do you deal with the time zone gaps with your Europe office, especially with your Europe office?
Sure, yeah. I mean, again, another area where it was difficult at first, but some silver linings. I think that I would say the main way that we deal with this is by ensuring that all of our kind of meetings or the times when you may need that kind of cross-functional or cross-team communication happens between, essentially 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern time. And that's where we really get the time zone overlap. And it has the benefit of making sure that, yes, not only can we have that sort of cross-team communication in the morning Eastern time, but we won't be having meetings outside that time. So everyone else who is in South America or in New York can kind of focus a bit more in the afternoon and really have some uninterrupted time to work on whatever they need to work on that day. So that's definitely one way that we manage it. And as I mentioned in the prior answer, a renewed focus on documentation and on written communication has been a big part of, I would say, leveling the playing field when it comes to keeping in the loop on what we're planning to build and getting an opportunity to provide your comments and your feedback. Marcus, anything else other than those two?
No, that's pretty much it. The focus on asynchronous communication, right? On that, not having the expectation that your questions will come back immediately from someone else actually helps us frame our thinking better. Like, we're not just firing a question right away. We're thinking what the problem is, and we write in an email and say, hey guys, can you help me with that? And then the next morning, the answer came with a very thought out answer. It takes a little bit getting used to, not having the immediate feedback, but with some planning, we can actually make it better than what before.
Yeah, otherwise, I think you just spend your whole day responding to Slack messages. I do think that there's a sense that, yes, it was a bit of an adjustment, but the added structure in our day is not a bad thing. Because, I think we have enough, we're all humans and we can't always resist the pull of Slack as much as we would want to, but for sure, some of the structure helps with that, I think.
Sure, it does.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to, I know, again, my engineering lead, Glenn, he is pretty much done at 12, so it kind of like kicks me into gear early in the morning to make sure if I have any issues, I get it out to him before that. We have another question from the audience, actually. Can you talk a bit about how you build out your product roadmap and how it changes when you have to pivot?
Sure, I can take that one. We plan on a roughly quarterly basis, and we generally plan for the upcoming quarter as well as a bit of planning for the quarter that follows. And so our plans are certainly at the, I would say, lowest level of fidelity if you're talking about anything that's happening 6 months out. Though even there, you may have some large initiatives that you kind of are already aware of being on the horizon that you kind of bucket a bit of, bucket the time for. I would definitely say that, as a startup and it still is a fairly young company, you do have to remain flexible to changing business circumstances. There are going to be times when we have the opportunity to maybe enter into a new business relationship or create a new financial product for our investors that may be of value. And of course, you have the macro environment to consider as well. No one could have predicted this year's events, but I think that our response to this year's events has been one of kind of remaining flexible and remaining alert for those opportunities to create value for our customers. And sometimes that means you're going to have to change your plans. So while we do plan on a quarterly basis, we remain open to some of those opportunities. From there, I guess I would say that, to keep in mind that we do have now multiple smaller teams. You've heard Talia reference her pod or her engineering team a few times. So we do have specific teams focused on various areas of the investor experience. And so the prioritization also happens kind of within those verticals to say, okay, for the goal of sort of customer acquisition, what are the top things we need to do this quarter? That type of thing would be prioritized separately than thinking about projects that would be more oriented toward existing investors. And so we essentially make sure that across the engineering and product organization, we have resources for all of those important areas or important goals, and then prioritize within them.
And maybe Marcus, you can talk. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add that it does help that Yieldstreet's product market fit has been so awesome from the start. I mean, of course, we are expanding our offering, we are building new products, and we do adapt, of course, to changing market conditions. But Yieldstreet's core business today is the same as it was 5 years ago. Right? We never had a true pivot like some companies have, that they end up in a completely different market space than they were before.
I think if anything, we definitely expanded, right? We do have another question from the audience. I'll just keep reading these out. What applications are used between the product and engineering orgs to ensure alignment and delivery?
Go ahead, Marcus.
The tools that we use.
Marcus,
yeah, I guess that's it. Not much really. I mean, we do have a process when we use some tools to track our progress, but much of the ensuring delivery thing is conversation and planning and just natural progress. It's not the tool that does it for us. Right? We have Slack for day-to-day communication. We use email for asynchronous communication, especially with people in other time zones. We do use a ticket tracking tool called Clubhouse, not one of the most popular out there, and a few others. but these are there to support us, and they don't really enforce our process or our way of working.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that that may be helpful to people, we, as I mentioned a couple times already, we had improved our focus on documentation a lot over the past year as we added the team in Malta. And prior to that, we were and still are heavy users of Google Docs when it comes to things kind of in the planning stage. But we added Nuclino, which is a wiki, as well for sort of what I would call post-implementation documents, just to create a living record of what we've done so that new hires and other people who are switching teams, even within the company, can get read in on what it is we've been working on recently and kind of get up to speed that way. Only other thing I would call out is we use a tool called Fun Retro. I think all of our pods use Fun Retro for the 2-week retrospective at the end of every sprint. And I think that it's a great tool for distributed teams. It allows for folks to kind of think about their feedback independently, and then there's a process for them sorting, merging, and voting on the topics for discussion. And I think it's been something that has definitely produced a lot of engagement in retrospectives, which I think are so important to a team. And it's been great to use even with people who are not kind of physically in the same place.
It's appropriately named. It's a fun little tool.
Fun. Yes.
Yeah, the retro I think gives the product managers on our team a great chance to kind of like create action items, and I think it creates a lot of accountability for sure. I like that a lot. Another question: how do you meet engineers or recruit remotely?
That's certainly more challenging, right?
Right. Mostly it's boots on the ground, right? The team started in Brazil with me and every other person that we've hired since then was directly or indirectly part of my network, right? I mean, the first few hires after me were people that I directly knew, and after that, more recommendations or recommendations from recommendations, and so on. We've expanded our network. And I think in New York, a lot of the same has happened. And in Malta, I think everyone there, one way or the other, is connected to Paul, our first hire in Malta, which then was connected to Rishi. So a lot of networking.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we've had to fully confront this question, to be honest. I think that, like many companies, we've been certainly hiring recently, but I would say in a more focused and probably disciplined manner, trying to kind of re-enter and get back to normal at a sort of responsible pace. But I think we have made hires in the past 9 months for sure. And, I definitely think it is a little bit, certainly when you have those personal networks to rely on, it makes it a little easier. But, we have hired in the past 9 months from people just kind of coming in through our recruiting website, our career site, and doing video calls as interviews with the team, and onboarding remotely. I participate in the onboarding. I do a product demo for all of our new hires. So I've had the great opportunity to meet all of them, at least briefly. And definitely, I would say it's an adjustment and a challenge, but I think we've been pretty successful so far at helping people feel part of Yieldstreet, even as they're new to the company. But it's definitely a muscle I think we've been developing in the past year. I don't think we necessarily had that competency prior to coronavirus.
What do you look for in candidates, would you say, Glenna? Maybe you can talk a little bit from the product side, and then Marcus could discuss what he looks for in an engineer.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost, what you look for is the sort of ability to think about the business strategy from a high level, and then take that down into a more granular understanding of how you would change the product experience to meet certain business goals. So I think as a PM, it takes a couple of different types of thinking to be successful. You do have to be able to think strategically and high level and speak with various members of the business about what they're trying to achieve. And then you also have to be able to work well with engineering on figuring out, and design on figuring out, okay, we understand our problem. Now, what are the solutions that we might design together to solve that problem? And so there's a lot of teamwork involved here. And I think that that's maybe a misconception in like popular culture that, you know, software engineering is just like coders sitting in the dark alone. But the reality is that this is very much a team sport. So hiring product managers, I have to be really confident in their capability to communicate with all the relevant team members across the business, across design, across engineering, and to do that no matter where those people happen to be based.
Yeah, and from the engineering side, I'd say the one thing that I'm looking for in all candidates is curiosity, right? It has to be someone that's willing to learn, that's curious about learning new things, acquiring new skills. Like I mentioned before, our software engineers do way more than just coding. They actually contribute to product ideas and more. And it takes someone that actually has that curiosity to get that way. Right? Not everyone does, and that's okay. I mean, to each their own. But for Yieldstreet, every employee, every engineer has to be curious, has to be someone who's willing to go out there and pick up new skills and learn new things.
And since we're talking about just teams and how they work together and how new hires would work together, and we are a Fintech app, so how does the finance part of it come in? Like, how do the engineers and the product and PDT, I guess in general, which is product design and tech, how do they interact with the finance side? Would you say?
Well,
that's we call them.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the product that we offer is not just a online platform for kind of investing your money and monitoring those investments, right? There's the underlying financial product without which we do not have a business. So our ability to really empathize, I think, with each other is super important. We may come from very different backgrounds and have different sets of skills, but at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same thing for our investor base, which is to enable them to invest in all the great deals that are sourced by the originations team and brought to our platform by the investments team and serviced on an ongoing basis by our servicing team. So it's really something that's 100% a team effort. And I think that, again, I guess I'll repeat a bit what I said before, that, you know, prior to coronavirus, maybe it would have been harder for an engineer in Brazil to really kind of interact or hear directly from someone on the investments team. But now that we're doing more kind of virtual events, it's been a bit easier, I think, for us to develop that understanding of each other's roles and how everyone fits into the broader picture of Yieldstreet. So I think that's really been great and one of the major silver linings, I think, of this.
How does engineering interact, would you say, Marcus?
Pretty much the same, right? I mean, when onboarding every software engineer, we get that product demo that Glenna usually does, but sometimes people from other areas of the company might be involved with, explaining financial concepts, explaining how a product really works, not from a tech standpoint, but from an actual financial standpoint. Like, why are we offering it? Why is this attractive to people? We get to hear that from finance people themselves. It's a muscle, like Glenna said before, we are flexing more often lately. We are still learning this, but it just gets better by the day. Getting that direct context, that exposition in there to really understand what we are doing helps everyone.
So you're saying they're like a connection to the investors. So in terms of like how you would, how does product and engineering decide what new features to add to our app or to our mobile app or to our website? How does that kind of come top down? I know when we did the hackathon, we built a bunch of really cool things. Like one of them was the simulator. And I recently saw that in our portfolio pod, a simulator was built in. So how does that kind of trickle down?
Yeah, so I think of course, it's a bit like what I said before. On a quarterly basis, we really think about like what is it that we're trying to achieve as a business, and then how the individual pods or engineering teams can help achieve that goal. And each PM who works within each pod will be able to work with their team, including design and engineering, to define a bit the ways that they think the team can contribute toward meeting those objectives. And so from there, it's essentially You then develop a set of ideas that you have that may help achieve the goal. You have some sense of what their impact toward the goal is going to be. You're able to work with engineering to develop a sense of the ballpark level of effort to achieve it. And you use some of those dimensions, including how confident you feel about those estimates, to kind of force rank the priorities against each other. And from there, it's about understanding, how are you going to then ship that within, a 2-week time period, roughly one sprint, and then what's your plan for measuring going forward? How are you going to assess and measure whether the feature had its intended impact? And then what are you going to do to your roadmap to adjust from there based on what you learn? So I do think it's the planning process that I outlined earlier, as well as the ongoing commitment to measuring the impact and adjusting from there.
There's a lot of data analysis involved.
Yeah, and I think as ideas come from anywhere, good ideas come from anywhere. Like Marcus said, we create the expectation on the team that anyone can come to us with a good idea, and that includes the investors. We're in frequent contact with our investor relations team, who hear from investors every day about what they're finding helpful, what they want more of, what they're not finding useful. People are not shy; they tell us, and we appreciate that because it helps us become a better team, a better company.
Yeah, and as engineers, every request we get from investment relations helps inform us what would be better to do. Right? If I'm handling a bug, I'm handling a situation very often, I would think, hey, I don't want to do this every day, so I'll think of a feature that will reduce the numbers of requests like this, try to make people happy. And one way or the other, engineers are also users of the application. If for testing only, we are every day logging in, going through workflows and doing exercise in the application. So we get to feel some of the same experiences that the investor has. And from these usually come suggestions.
Awesome. Well, there are no questions from the audience, so I do want to wrap up. I just want to say thank you to Glenna and Marcus for taking the time to do this. You guys did a great job. I hope everyone in the audience enjoyed hearing from them. Just before we leave, just make sure to visit Yieldstreet.com to learn more about our offerings. And also visit our distributed.yieldstreet.com blog. It's our product design and tech blogs, just in case you want to learn more about our platform. I also have an article in there about being a new engineer at Yieldstreet. So definitely check it out and stay tuned as we release content on a regular basis. And as always, stay safe and healthy. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.